Hello. Is everything working? The chat box is working. That's good, because it wasn't working before. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Can you believe it? Let me know if you can hear me, see me, everything. Sorry you're dealing with buffering, Jeff. Hopefully it is going to clear up. Everything looks good on my end. It's been a while since we've had a book reading. I apologize. I'm very bad at getting obsessed with projects when I get into one, so when I get into a big project, it can take over my life. And I had 2 or 3 of those in the last couple months that just kind of absorbed everything I was doing, and so I've been streaming less in general. Did none book readings, none at all. We're at the point where new copies of the books have come out, like the next editions, and we haven't even finished Grandmaster, so I'm going to try and get back to doing that. And we are returning with Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, since we've read book 1 of Scum Villain, and we've read book 1 of Heavenly Official's Blessing. I think it only should, follow suit. We should finish book 1 of Grandmaster before we continue with the other books. Especially because I think we've also finished book 2 of both of those, because we've been reading both of those series for a while. So I think we need to catch up with Grandmaster. And the second book of Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation just came out very recently. I don't have it yet, but I figure I'll pick it up whenever we finish with this book. We are only on chapter 3. I guess I went and checked the previous recording. We've only read 2 chapters, but to catch up if you have missed it, if it's been a while. Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation is a Chinese novel. I believe it's I'm not even going to say because I'm not entirely certain. It's a genre of fiction that involves kind of like cultivation and magic and zombies. It's a specific genre of Chinese fiction. It's either Zanhua or Wuxia. There's differences about like how the magic works and things, so I'm not 100% certain which one this is. I'm leaning towards Shanhua. It's been a while since I've studied this stuff, so clearly I have to catch back up. The main character is Wei Ying, a young man who was resurrected from death in the very first chapter of the book. It opens with his death, yay. He comes back, he's like, well, what the heck's going on? Something weird. I've been resurrected to have to get revenge for this guy that resurrected me. He wants me to avenge him and his suffering in his life. Some things happen. He avenges some stuff. And he escapes. We just left off at the end of the last chapter with him making his escape from the mansion so that he can go and figure out his new life. It is also a love story between him and Lanjan, who is like his childhood friend, kind of. There's flashbacks in the story, but we haven't gotten to one yet. In the last chapter, Lanjan showed up at the last second, to save the day. And Wei Ying was like, well, I gotta get the fuck out of here. And he ran off. So now he is running away with the donkey that he stole to figure out what he's gonna do with his life. Let me know if the music is too loud or if I pronounce anything poorly. I know my early videos of me reading, I get a lot of comments of like, oh my god, the pronunciation is so bad. I apologize. I am doing my best. Alright. The Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, or Modao Zushi. Chapter 3, The Prideful. It didn't take long before Wei Wuxian discovered that he might have made a mistake. The spotted donkey that he'd stolen away with was way too hard to please. It was a mere donkey, but all it would eat was fresh, tender grass that dripped with dew, and it would refuse to eat if the tip of the grass had yellowed even a little bit. When they passed by a farmhouse, Wei Wuxian stole a bit of straw. Really, puppy? Lola? Really, Lola? She's not going to come over here and say hi. She just wants to go outside. Let me let her outside very quickly. I should know by now to let her out right before I start. Lola, why you a grump? Lola. You go outside? You go outside. I return with a different animal. wake you up. Why is your foot stuck? Why were you sleeping like this? He was sleeping like this. Why? Did you just get your foot stuck and then fall asleep that way? My goodness, Batman. You're so silly. You're so silly. Can I put you up here? Will you fit? Let me move things. There we go. Batman can sit with us now. Hello, folks that are joining us. Welcome, Rehan. I hope I've said that right. Feel free to correct me if I didn't. How do I scoot over a little bit. Now we have a little bit of a Batman. All right. When they passed by a farmhouse, Wei Wuxian stole a bit of straw to feed it. After only chewing a couple of bites, it spat it out in disgust, and the sound of it was louder and clearer than when a human spat. If it didn't eat well, then it would refuse to walk, throw tantrums, and kick its legs. Wei Wuxian himself was nearly walloped many times. On top of that, its braying cry was remarkably horrible. As a steed or as a beloved pet, it was utterly useless. Wei Wuxian couldn't help but miss his sword, which was most likely now hanging on some major clan leader's wall as a trophy. Pulling and dragging the donkey for all he was worth, he traveled down the rambling road. He finally came to pass the large paddy field of a village. The sun was scorching. Next to the field ridge was a large locust tree, and the area beneath the tree was thick with green shade. There was also an old well, and the villagers had placed a bucket and a scoop next to it to provide relief to the thirst of passerbys. When the spotted donkey reached this place, it refused to walk a step farther. Wei Wuxian hopped down and patted its esteemed derriere. "Well, aren't you a pampered and noble little steed, and even harder to please than I am?" The donkey snorted at him. As they mucked around, a group approached from the crisscrossing paths in the distance. I have cat hair. Just being near you, Batman, cat hair all over me. As they mucked... Oh, I read that. Those people carried hand-woven bamboo baskets and wore cloth shirts and straw shoes. They exuded the rustic air of the country from head to toe. There was a round-faced young girl among them, somewhat delicately beautiful, but hardly notably so. Perhaps they had also trekked for too long under the scorching sun, as they also wanted to come over for a drink of water and to stand under the shade. However, when they saw a kicking and screaming spotted donkey tied to the tree, accompanied by a disheveled, loose-haired lunatic smeared with rouge and white powder, they didn't dare come over. I gotta try that technique out when I don't want to be approached in public. Wei Wuxian had always considered himself a man who cherished beauty, so when he noticed their hesitation, he moved from his spot to give them space and went to bother the spotted donkey. When that group saw he was harmless, they relaxed and walked over. Each of them was drenched in sweat and red in the face, fanning themselves and drawing water as they needed. The girl sat by the well, and seeming to know that Wei Wuxian had purposely yielded space, she smiled softly at him. One of the men was holding a compass in his hands, and he gazed far into the distance before looking back down, confused. How come the needle still won't move, even though we're almost at the foot of Mount Dafan? The carvings on the compass and its needle were both quite peculiar. It was no ordinary compass. A compass of ill winds wasn't used to pathfind, but rather to point out the whereabouts of nearby nefarious creatures. Wei Wuxian knew this meant he'd come across one of the small, downtrodden clans of the countryside. Outside of the elite, affluent clans, there were also quite a number of these small, independent clans. Wei Wuxian thought perhaps they'd traveled here from the countryside to seek refuge with a large clan with which they had some familial relation, or maybe they were here to go on a night hunt. The middle-aged man, who was the group's leader, told the other man to go for his drink and commented, "Is that compass of yours broken? I'll give you a new one later. Mount Dafan is less than 5 kilometers away, so we can't rest for long. We've traveled all this way. It won't be worth it if we slack off now and fall behind the others." It was a night hunt, as expected. Many cultivation clans, in their appreciation for refined elegance, called the act of traveling the world to exorcise evil hunting expeditions. And because said evil often appeared at night, such activities were thus called night hunts. There were numerous cultivation clans that had come and gone, and only a handful that had been able to make a name for themselves. If an ordinary clan, one without generations of accumulated reputation to stand on, wanted to join the higher ranks and become famous, wanted to gain prestige and respect among the cultivation world, then they had to show tangible achievements. Only when they'd hunted down ruthless monsters or disaster-bringing malicious fiends did their words gain any weight. These night hunts had originally been Wei Wuxian's expertise, but he had been constantly on the move the past few days and had only managed to hunt down a handful of little devils from the few graves he'd broken into. He was in need of a band of tyrannical ghost generals to do his bidding, so he too decided to head to that Rice Mountain to try his luck. If there was one that proved useful, he'd capture it for his own use. I love that. In the TV show, they don't, touch on the kind of vague evil, I guess. It's not necessarily evil, but the maliciousness. In Chinese culture and in the cultivation canon, resurrecting a spirit or a body like that means that they can never go back into, the cycle of reincarnation. It's a bad thing. It's kind of a selfish thing. And this Wei Ying is just I need a bodyguard. Sorry, buddy, but, I love that he's just that much of a character. He's a little more noble in the TV show, which is fine and good, but I like those rough-edged characters. The group had finished their break and was ready to be on their way as well. Before they left, the round-faced girl took out a half-green, barely red apple from the basket on her back and handed it to Wei Wuxian. "For you." Wei Wuxian extended his hand to receive it with a happy grin, but the spotted donkey raised its head and bared its teeth to bite for it, so Wei Wuxian quickly snatched it up instead. Seeing how the monkey drooled for the little apple, an idea came to him. Upon finding a long branch and some fishing thread, he dangled the apple in front of the donkey. The spotted donkey smelled the sweet fragrance of the apple and craved it. With its head raised, it chased after the apple that dangled just out of reach. It ended up becoming faster than all the renowned steeds Wei Wuxian had seen before, leaving them all in the dust. Oh, thank you, Black Mount. I'm glad you enjoy them. And hello, Marcos. I am doing very well. We finished Sacred Stones. No, we haven't finished it yet, but I wanted to get back to book readings because it has been a while. I need to get back into a pattern of streaming well. I tended to do the book readings in the morning, and I got really involved with some projects that kept me working all morning, and I'd be like, "Ah, dang, I missed it. I missed it." And then once you break a pattern, it becomes easy to keep forgetting. I am a person that does much better if I can establish a pattern, and I haven't with streaming because real life keeps getting in the way. Let's see where we were. The donkey ran without stopping, and Wei Wuxian arrived at Mount Dafan before dark. It was only when he reached the foot of the mountain that he learned the fan in Dafan did not mean rice, but instead Brahma. Seen from a distance, the shape of the mountain resembled that of a short, carefree, and content Buddha, hence its name. There was a small town at the foot of the mountain that was called Fojiao Town, meaning Buddha's foot. I think it would be Fojiao. So the symbols in the words, you can't, if someone says a word aloud in Chinese, you don't know what symbols are being used. So he's saying here, he realized, he called it Rice Mountain because he thought the symbol was the symbol for rice, but it's actually the symbol for the Buddha, because the mountain kind of looks like a Buddha. There were more cultivators gathered here than he imagined. It was an assembly of all sorts, a confusion of colors caused by the different uniforms of various clans and sects walking down the street. For some reason, everyone appeared tense. Even at the sight of his wacky looks, no one seemed like they could spare a moment to mock him. At the center of the long street, there were a bunch of cultivators gathered in a serious discussion. It sounded like they were having quite a difference of opinions. Wei Wuxian could hear them from down the street. It was all right at first, but it somehow grew more and more heated. "I do not believe there are soul-eating fiends at all. There was clearly no activity on any azimuth of the compass of ill winds. If there aren't, then how did 7 townspeople lose their souls? They couldn't possibly have all contracted the same disease. I've never heard of such an illness before. Just because the compass of ill winds doesn't show something doesn't mean it's not there. The most it can do is point in a general direction anyway. It's not accurate enough to be fully trusted. Maybe there's something nearby obstructing the needle. Why don't you think about who invented the compass of ill winds? I've never heard of anything that can interfere with the needle. What are you trying to say, huh? What are you implying? Of course I know the compass of ill winds was created by Wei Ying, but it's not like his creations are perfect, so why are you stopping people from questioning it? I didn't say you can't, and I didn't say his creations are perfect either. No need to slander. I think he's being very, very rude there, too, because Wei Ying is his personal name, not Wei Wuxian is his, like, public name. So I think by calling him that so personally when he doesn't know the dude, he's being very rude. And so their argument swerved in a different direction. Wei Wuxian giggled and laughed as he rode past on his donkey. He wouldn't have thought that after so many years, he still stood strong and unfailing as a topic in Cultivator's verbal battles. I love that image of him just riding on his donkey and laughing because people are arguing about him even when he's dead. Okay, the next sentence has a play on words. It says, he had a way of starting conflict, but it's spelled like his name. If there was ever a vote on who had the most enduring popularity amongst all the clans, he was the sure winner. In all fairness, the cultivator wasn't wrong. The compass of ill winds that was in common use now was only an early version, so it was indeed not accurate enough. He'd started on refining it, but it wasn't his fault that his good old lair had been toppled before he was done. So everyone would just have to deal with it and continue using the fallible first edition. Anyway, creatures that consumed flesh were mostly low-level, walking corpses, for example. Only refined high-level monsters or spirits could consume and digest souls. 7 souls had been eaten in one go, too, so it was no wonder many clans had assembled here. Since this night hunt's prey was hardly insignificant in strength, it couldn't be helped the compass of ill winds would run into issues. Wei Wuxian pulled on the reins and hopped off the donkey, then grabbed the apple that had been dangling in front of it this entire way and tugged it down to its mouth. One bite, only one bite. Bah, are you trying to eat my entire hand in one bite? He took a couple of bites from the other side of the apple, then stuffed it back in the spotted donkey's mouth. As he was reflecting on how he'd fallen so low as to share a single apple with a donkey, someone suddenly bumped into his back. He turned his head and saw it was a girl. While she was the one who had bumped into him, she took no notice of him at all. Her eyes were unfocused as she gazed, fixated in a certain direction with a smile on her face. Wei Wuxian followed the azimuth of her gaze. It was in the direction was a dense mountaintop. It was Mount Dafan. All of a sudden, without warning, the girl started dancing in front of him. This dance was feral and threatening, her arms flailing. Wei Wuxian was taking great pleasure in watching the show, but just then a woman came dashing over with her skirt lifted. She wailed as she hugged the girl. "Ayan, let's go back, let's go!" Ayan fought her off. The smile on her face, never having faded, carried a hair-raising sense of maternal affection, and she danced and pranced while that woman continued to chase after her around the streets, weeping as she went. A street vendor on the side commented, "What a sin. Ayan from Blacksmith Zhang's house escaped again. It's truly sad for her mom, Ayan's husband, and her own husband as well. It's not right at all." Wei Wuxian sauntered about, and from snatches of overheard conversations on the streets, sorted out the strange affair that had happened here. There was an old graveyard on Mount Dafan, and most of the ancestral graves of Fojiao's townspeople were located there. Sometimes they also dug graves and placed wooden markers for unnamed corpses. Many months ago, there had been a stormy night where lightning crashed and thunder drummed, and after a night of being battered by torrential rain, a piece of land from the mountain slid and collapsed. This piece of land, more specifically, was the graveyard. Many of the old graves were destroyed, and several coffins were expelled from the earth. Then lightning struck, sending the coffin lids flying and charring black both the corpses and their coffins. The people of Fojiao town felt very uneasy at all this. They prayed for good fortune and rebuilt the old graveyard in the hopes that would settle things. Despite their efforts, since then, cases of people losing their souls began to frequently crop up in Fojiao town. The first one was a deadbeat. The man was a penniless good-for-nothing, spending his days in idleness. But since he always loved catching birds up on the mountain, it just so happened he got trapped on Mount Dafan the night of the landslide. He was scared half to death, but at least he was still alive. The curious thing was, it didn't take long after his return for him to suddenly get married. The wedding was conducted with great fanfare, and he declared his intent to do good from that day onward, to accumulate good fortune, and to live the rest of his life in peace. On his wedding night, he got blackout drunk and never got up after lying down in bed. The bride called to him, but he wouldn't respond. It was only after pushing him she discovered the groom had an empty stare, his body cold. Aside from his breathing, he was no different than the dead. He lay like this, neither eating nor drinking, for many days, then was finally buried in peace. Pitiful was the bride who'd only just been married to be turned into a widow. The second one was Ayan from Blacksmith Jiang's family. The girl had just gotten engaged when the very next day her future husband was killed by a jackal while hunting on the mountain. After learning of this, she was struck by the same affliction as had descended upon the deadbeat. Fortunately, she recovered from the soulless disease on her own after some time. However, it also caused her to become deranged, giggling as she danced outside in front of others. The third one was Ayan's father, Blacksmith Jiang. To date, there had now been 7 people who had fallen victim consecutively. Wei Wuxian mulled this over. This was most likely a soul-eating fiend, not a soul-eating beast. Even though the difference was but one word, they were completely distinct creatures. Hope you're all doing well this witching hour, the perfect time for fan fictions. It's 1:30 where you are. It is 11:30 in the morning for me. It's quite early. Hello, folks joining us. Welcome. Let's see here. Where was I? Fiends belong to the ghost category, while beasts were of the monster category. In his opinion, all this might be the fault of the old graveyard that had collapsed from tremors on the landslide. Once lightning struck open the coffins, any ancient fiends resting within would be unleashed. He'd be able to determine if this really was the case once he took a look at what the coffins were made of, and if there were any remnants of seal talismans. However, the people of Fojiao Town must surely have reburied the charred coffins a long time ago, and also reburied the corpses anew, so there definitely wouldn't be much evidence left. He would have to take the trail that started from Fojiao Town in order to properly scale the mountain, so Wei Wuxian leisurely treaded up the hill on his donkey. After a while, he ran into a few people descending the mountain with gloomy expressions. Some of them carried injuries on their face, and they were all talking at once. They all jumped in surprise when they ran into this donkey rider with a face caked in hanged ghost makeup under the darkening skies, and they cursed as they went around him to hurry down the hill. Why has he not washed his face yet? He was at a well, and then he was at a town, and he still hasn't washed his face. I think he enjoys scaring people. Wei Wuxian turned his head and wondered, could it be that the prey was too difficult to handle, and they were going back empty-handed? He slapped the donkey's hip after a moment's thought, and trotted up the mountain. The group groused and complained after his departure. I've never met anyone so unreasonable. Why would the clan leader of such a big clan come here just to fight us over a soul-eating fiend? He already killed plenty of those when he was younger, I'm sure. What can you do? He's the sect leader. Of all the clans to offend, you don't offend the Jiang clan. And of all the people to offend, you never offend Jiancheng. Let's just write it off as our bad luck, pack up, and get out of here. A torch would be necessary to continue into the mountain forest if the sky got any darker. Wei Wuxian walked for a while and was quite surprised to not run into many cultivators. Of all the clans that came, could it really be that half are arguing theory in Fojiao Town, while the other half are like that group from earlier, trying, failing, and going back empty-handed? Suddenly, a cry for help came from ahead. Somebody! Help! There were both male and female voices, their cries full of panic and helplessness. It didn't sound fake, even though 9 times out of 10, cries for help in the wild were evil spirits causing mischief, luring the ignorant into a trap. Wei Wuxian, however, was thrilled. The eviler the better. It had better be evil enough. He urged the donkey to run toward where the voices were coming from, but when he arrived, there was nothing in sight. When he looked up, rather than any evil spirits or monsters, he saw the independent countryside clan he'd run into previously by the field ridge. They were hanging from a tree, caught in a massive, shimmering gold net. The middle-aged man that had led the group to patrol and scout the forest area at first, but they hadn't run into any prey they were hoping for. Instead, they stepped into the net trap some rich folk had set up and ended up hanging from the tree as they cried their grievances. They perked up when they saw someone coming, but were immediately disappointed to realize it was the lunatic. While the threads of this immortal binding net were thin, the material was of the highest grade, durable and indestructible. Once caught, it didn't matter if you were a human or a god, a ghost or a spirit. You'd be trapped a good while. Unless, that is, the net was cut with an immortal device of an even higher grade. It'd be pointless to expect this lunatic to help them down. He probably didn't even know what the net was. Just as they were going to try to ask him to find help, there came the sound of agile steps, crinkling leaves, approaching swiftly. From within the pitch-black woods there emerged a youth dressed in a light-colored jacket. There was a vermilion mark dotted between the brows of this little young master, and his features were so fine they were almost harsh. He was extremely young, around the same age as Lan Shizui. That sound is like a J sound. I always have trouble with it. Sijui. I will keep practicing. A mere adolescent. On his back he carried a quiver of arrows and a long sword shimmering with gold, and in his hand there was a longbow. The embroidery on his robes was indisputably exquisite, swirling together into extraordinary white peonies. The golden threads twinkled delicately in the night. Wei Wuxian marveled inwardly. Rich. This had to be a young master belonging to the Jin clan of Lanling. Only this clan used the white peony as their insignia. By comparing themselves to the king of flowers, they implied they were kings among immortals. Dotting one's forehead with cinnabar symbolized the conviction to open the doors to wisdom, allowing the vermilion light of eternity to shine upon the world. This little young master had been about to shoot when he saw the immortal binding net had only captured humans. Disappointment flashed on his face and he lost his patience. It's you stupid idiots every time. Over 400 immortal binding nets, but it's always the same. Before they manage to catch any prey, dozens of them get wrecked by you lot. The same thought was still forefront in Wei Wuxian's mind. Rich. An immortal binding net was already considerably expensive, and he'd set up 400 of them in one go, as expected of the Jin clan of Lanling. An even slightly smaller clan would have been reduced to poverty and ruin. However, to abuse the immortal binding net like this, to hunt indiscriminately, was not a night hunt. This was clearly an act of driving others out in order to hoard the spoils. It appeared that the cultivators who retreated previously hadn't done so because the prey was difficult, but because these prestigious sects weren't ones to be offended. During the days he'd spent strolling along, and on account of the ravenous eavesdropping earlier in Fojiao town, Wei Wuxian had heard plenty of gossip about the rises and falls within the cultivation world. As the final victor of the tangled war between cultivation clans that had spanned over 100 years, the Jin clan of Lanling now led the clans and sects. The head of their clan was even respectfully addressed as Cultivation Chief. The Jin clan had always been haughty and enjoyed extravagance. In the span of years spent presiding high above the others, the clan had prospered and grown powerful, and their disciples were raised to dominate others without scruple. Inferior clans, no matter how much they were humiliated, had no choice but to swallow it down. Such a small cultivation house from the countryside could afford even less to offend them. This was why, although the boy's words were harsh and the people hanging in the net turned red in the face of the abuse, they still didn't dare argue back. Spoiled children. The middle-aged man said subserviently, "Will the young master grant us the favor of lowering us down?" The youth was frustrated. His prey still hadn't shown itself, so this country bumpkin was a perfect secondary target for venting his anger. He crossed his arms. "Stay hanging there so you don't wander around hindering me again. Once I catch the soul-eating beast, I'll let you guys go, if I remember." If they really hung from that tree the entire night, unable to move, there would be nothing they could do but have their souls sucked out if the thing wandering Mount Dafan came upon them. The round-faced girl who'd given Wei Wuxian an apple was terrified and wept out loud. Wei Wuxian was sitting cross-legged on the back of the spotted donkey, but when the donkey heard her crying, its long ears twitched. Suddenly it leapt forth. It even let out a long bray when it did, and if not for that uniquely horrible sound, it would have appeared irresistibly heroic. It wouldn't be idle flattery to call it a mighty young colt. Caught off guard, Wei Wuxian was thrown off its back and nearly broke his skull from the fall. The spotted donkey's broad head charged toward the youth, apparently convinced it could send the boy flying with a headbutt. The youth's arrow was still nocked in his bow, so he was ready to shoot it down. Wei Wuxian didn't want to go about finding a new ride so soon, so he pulled at the reins with all his might. That youth took a glance at him and briefly appeared stunned before his expression immediately turned into scorn. He pursed his lips. "So it's you." That tone was 2 parts surprise and 8 parts revulsion, making Wei Wuxian blink in confusion. "What, you went crazy after getting kicked back to your old home? Look at that ghastly painted face. I can't believe they let you out." What was this incredible thing he'd just heard? Could it be? Wei Wuxian slapped his own thigh. Could it be that Mo Xuanyu's father was not some random small-time clan leader, but the infamous Jin Guangshan? Jin Guangshan. To explain. So Wei Wuxian was resurrected in a different person's body, a kid named Mo Xuanyu. Mo Xuanyu was the illegitimate child of a cultivator. It wasn't revealed who at the time, but he was abused for being basically an outsider and it really sucked. Wei Wuxian has just realized, because of the way that this Jin clan member responded to him, that the father of the poor kid was this Jin Guangshan, and we're about to learn why this guy has such a reputation. Big jerk ass. I hate this guy. Jin Guangshan had been the previous head of the Jin clan of Lanling and had long since passed on. This was a character with a long story. He had a fiercely strict madam wife from an illustrious family and had been notoriously afraid of her. But scared as he might have been, he still incessantly played around with other women. No matter how strict Madame Jin was, she couldn't follow him around 24 hours a day. He was relentless in his affairs, betting women from distinguished ladies to wild prostitutes. And while he loved womanizing and had a great number of illegitimate children, he was extremely fickle in love. Once he grew tired of a woman, she'd be cast from his mind without any thought to responsibility. Of his many illegitimate children, only one had been outstanding enough to be recognized and taken back, and that was the current family head of the Jin clan of Lanling, Jin Guangyao. Furthermore, even the way Jin Guangshan had died was an embarrassment. Old but fully confident he was still robust, he'd fooled around with a bunch of women at once in order to challenge himself. However, he unfortunately overestimated his vitality and died during the orgy. This was simply too embarrassing to speak of, so the Jin clan of Lanling unanimously declared the old sect leader had passed due to overexertion, and the rest of the clans, in tacit understanding, all pretended not to know the full truth of the statement. In any case, that was the real reason for his infamy. Back during the siege of the burial mound, Jin Guangshan's contribution to the effort had come second only to Jiang Cheng's. Now that Wei Wuxian had overtaken his illegitimate son's body, he really didn't know how this score should be settled. The youth saw him zone out and grew annoyed. "Get out of here. Just seeing your face disgusts me, damn cut sleeve." Let's explain. Those of you who've joined us for readings before will probably remember that cut sleeve is a Chinese term for a homosexual person. I don't know if it's a modern term, but it's an old term from a story of an emperor that had a male lover who was, I think, asleep on his sleeve, and so he cut the sleeve off so he wouldn't wake up his lover and when he got out of bed, and so that's why gay people are called cut sleeves. In terms of seniority, Mo Xuanyu might have been this boy's uncle or some other elder, and yet he had to suffer such humiliation from a junior. Even if it wasn't for himself, as he was currently in Mo Xuanyu's body, Wei Wuxian felt he had a responsibility to humiliate the boy back. So he countered, "Didn't your mother teach you any manners?" Raging flames of fury flashed in the youth's eyes. He pulled the long sword from his back and glowered. "What did you say?" The sword shimmered gold. It was clearly a rare, high-quality weapon that would be out of many clans' reach, even if they hustled their entire lives. Wei Wuxian studied it, fixated, and felt the sword appeared rather familiar. But he'd seen plenty of high-quality swords that glowed golden, so he didn't think too deeply on it. He only twirled a small pouch in his hand. This was a spirit-trapping pouch that he'd thrown together haphazardly a few days ago, using scraps of fabric he'd found. The youth lunged at him, brandishing his sword, and Wei Wuxian took a small piece of paper cut in the shape of a human from the pouch. He dodged the attack and slapped the paper onto the boy's back. The youth was already swift, but Wei Wuxian had plenty of experience in tripping people and slapping talismans onto them, so he was faster. The youth felt his back go numb and heavy and then fell forward onto the ground involuntarily. The sword dropped to his side with a clang. If he couldn't get up, no matter how hard he tried. It was as if Mount Tai was sitting on top of him. More specifically, it was a ghost that had died of gluttony that clung to his back, crushing the breath out of him. While the little ghost was weak, it could easily take care of a brat like this. Wei Wuxian picked up the sword, weighed it in his hand, and then swung it at the immortal binding net, snapping it. The Cultivation family dropped to the ground in sorry confusion, then ran away in hurry without a word. The round-faced girl seemed to want to express thanks, but her elder dragged her away, afraid that the young Master Jin would hold an even deeper grudge should she say one more word. The youth on the ground yelled angrily, "Damn cut-sleeve! Look at you, going down the demonic path just because your spiritual power's too weak to cultivate into anything worthwhile. You watch yourself. Do you know who's here today? I'm gonna..." Wei Wuxian clutched his heart insincerely. I'm so scared." The cultivation method he'd employed in the past was denounced by the public. It harmed the cultivator's constitution after prolonged practice, but it allowed for speedy success and was unrestricted by one's innate spiritual prowess and natural talent, which was why it was an extremely tempting path. There was never a shortage of people who craved shortcuts in their training, and so this youth also thought Mo Xuanyu had strayed from the right path after being driven out of the Jin clan of Lanling. It was a perfectly logical suspicion, and it saved Wei Wuxian from further unnecessary trouble. Where was I? The youth tried to push off the ground, but still couldn't get up after several attempts. His face was flushed, and he clenched his teeth. "If you don't remove this thing, I'll tell my uncle and you'll be dead." Wei Wuxian asked curiously, "Why is it your uncle and not your dad? Who's your uncle?" There was suddenly a voice behind him, grave and intensely frigid. "I'm his uncle. Do you have any last words?" At the sound of that voice, every drop of blood in Wei Wuxian's body seemed to surge to his head, but then immediately drained away again. Thankfully, his face was already a mess of ghastly white, so it didn't look strange when he went a little paler. A man in purple attire strode over. He was dressed in a narrow-sleeved light robe, with his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. A silver bell dangled from his waist, yet there was no sound when he walked. This young man had fine brows and almond eyes, with a chiseled handsomeness to his features. His eyes were deep and intense, with a hint of aggression, his gaze like two streaks of cold lightning. He stopped and stood 3 meters away from Wei Wuxian. His expression was like that of a nocked arrow on a bow, ready to shoot, and even his composure was suffused with arrogant pride. He furrowed his brows. "Jinling, why have you dawdled for so long? Do I need to come and invite you back? Look at the terrible state you're in. Get the hell up." After the initial numbness in his brain had passed, Wei Wuxian quickly snapped out of it. He beckoned with his finger inside his sleeve, withdrawing the paper doll. Jinling felt the weight disappear off his back and immediately scrambled up, grabbing his sword back and scurrying to Jian Cheng's side. He pointed at Wei Wuxian and yelled, "I'll break your legs!" When the two stood together, there was a vague resemblance in their looks, much like a pair of brothers. Jian Cheng moved his finger, and the paper doll swiftly slipped from Wei Wuxian's fingers and flew into his hand. He took a glance at it, and a wave of resentment flared in his eyes. He clenched his fingers, and the paper was set ablaze, the ghost shrieking as it was burned to ashes. Jian Cheng said darkly, "Break his legs. Haven't I told you that when you run into heretics, you should kill them outright and feed them to your dog?" Wei Wuxian hastily backed away, leaving the donkey behind too. No matter how much Jian Cheng hated him, he had thought the feeling would have dispersed somewhat after so many years. Who would have thought it wasn't that easy? Not only was the hate still there, but it had thickened with time like a jug of aged wine, and that rage was taken out on every cultivator who imitated him. Uh-oh. So there's a really pretty picture here. I think I have all the pictures added to my files here. Let me see if I can get it. Images. should be... That's the kids. Oh, they're not in order. It doesn't look like I... Oh, wait, no, that's them. There it is. That's the pretty picture of our boys. That's Juncheng and Jinling. They're so pretty. I love it. The art in this book is very, very pretty. All right. There were people behind them standing guard, and this time Jinling attacked with greater ferocity. Wei Wuxian slipped 2 fingers into the spirit trapping pouch, but just as he was about to move, a streak of blue light flashed. It was the glare of a sword clashing with Jinling's sword, and it shattered the golden shimmer of his high-quality blade in an instant. It wasn't that the other sword was superior, but rather that the difference in ability between the 2 wielders was too great. Wei Wuxian had the timing figured out at first, but the radiance of this incoming sword disrupted his steps, and he stumbled, falling flat on the ground before a pair of snow-white boots. He froze for a moment, then slowly looked up. The first thing that entered his vision was a long and slender blade as crystalline as ice. This sword was famous in the cultivation world, and Wei Wuxian had had the honor of experiencing its power directly on multiple occasions, both fighting alongside and against it. The hilt was forged from pure silver that was refined by a secret method, and the blade was extremely thin, clear, and transparent. It emanated the frigid air of ice and snow, yet it could cut through iron as if it were mud. Thus, while the sword appeared light, agile, and transcendently airy, it was extremely heavy, and no ordinary person could possibly swing it. It was the sword Bichen. The blade reversed, and above Wei Wuxian's head there came the clang of the sword being sheathed. At the same time, Juncheng's voice came from the distance. I was wondering who it was, so it's Lan Gongzi. Okay, so there's a bunch of, like, ways that names in Chinese are edited based on who they are. Chan or what was her name? Adding an A to the front is like a cutesy nickname. Gongzi is like Mr. and it's very, very polite. It's like saying gentleman, you know, that kind of thing. So he's being formal. The pair of white boots unhurriedly took 3 steps forward, walking around Wei Wuxian. Wei Wuxian looked up and got to his feet. When he brushed past the person, the 2 locked eyes for a brief second, seemingly accidental. The newcomer was cloaked in soft white moonlight. He carried a 7-stringed guqin on his... I don't know if that's guqin, I think. It's an instrument, like a zither, I think is also what it's called. The body of the instrument was narrower than the usual standard and ebony black in color, but soft in the luster of its wood. A cloud-patterned ribbon was fastened around the man's forehead. The man was exceptional in both looks and elegance. His skin was fair, and his features were as refined as smooth jade. The color of his eyes was abnormally light, almost like colored glaze, and it made his gaze appear overly cold. There was a frostiness to his expression which was stern enough to appear stiff. Even when he saw Wei Wuxian's currently ridiculous-looking face, he appeared unperturbed. From head to toe, he was scrupulous and immaculate, without a single foot placed incorrectly. Even so, 2 words still jumped out in Wei Wuxian's mind. Funeral clothes. Those were funeral clothes, and that couldn't be denied, no matter how much the other clans proclaimed the uniforms of the Lan clan of Gusu to be the most pleasing to the eye and sang their exaggerated praises to the heavens. Furthermore, no matter how thoroughly Lan Wangji was praised as an unrivaled rare beauty, nothing could help the fact that he looked profoundly embittered, as if he had lost his wife. Oh, Wei Ying. So close. So close. You almost had it. In an unlucky year, enemies are bound to clash. Blessings never come in pairs, and misfortunes never come singly. Lan Wangji stood unspeaking. He faced Juncheng with quiet calm and met his eyes squarely. Juncheng was exceptionally handsome, but he was still a little inferior to the one standing before him, and certainly the more impatient of the 2. He quirked a brow. Hong Guangjun truly lives up to his reputation of appearing where there is chaos. What brings you here to the deep mountains today? Leaders of prominent cultivation clans did not normally care for low-level evil spirits. However, Lan Wangji was an exception. He was never picky about his night hunt prey, nor would he refuse to appear if the nefarious creature wasn't tough enough, or if it would not earn him any acclaim. He would attend as long as there was a plea for help, and it had always been that way ever since he was young. Thus, appearing where there is chaos was how the people appraised Hung Wanjun's night hunt expeditions and praised his character. The way Jiancheng said the phrase was not complimentary, however, and the juniors attending behind Lan Wangji all felt a little uncomfortable with his tone. Lan Jinyi was the blunt and outspoken sort. "Isn't sect leader Jiang here too?" Jiancheng replied coldly, "An elder is speaking. Who are you to interrupt? The Lan clan of Gusu pride themselves on being a clan of etiquette. This is what disciples are being taught?" Lan Wangji, who didn't seem to want to exchange any words with him, sent Lan Shizui a look. The latter understood. Let the juniors speak to each other. And so Lan Shizui... I struggle with his name. Lan Shizui... S-I-Z-H-U-I. But Z-H in Chinese is like a J sound. I don't know why I have such trouble saying this. Se-ju-i. 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 Lan Shizui, I think. Okay. Jin Gongzi. The night hunts have always been a fair competition among the clans, but Jin Gongzi has set up all these nets all over Mount Dafan and made it difficult for the cultivators of other houses to tread for fear of falling into traps. Does this not violate the rules of the night hunts? Jinling's cold expression was cast from the same mold as his uncle's. What can I do if they step into the traps due to their own stupidity? I must capture my prey. Everything else can wait. Lan Wangji wrinkled his brow. Jinling was about to say more when he suddenly realized he couldn't open his mouth nor produce any sound from his throat. He paled in panic. When Jiancheng saw that Jinling's lips were now glued together, unable to part, anger clouded his face and all previous forced civility went out the window. "You, Lan, what's the meaning of this? It's not up to you to discipline Jinling. Release the spell." The silence spell was what the Lan clan used to punish its disciples. Wei Wuxian had fallen victim to this little trick on many occasions. While it was not complex magic by any stretch of the imagination, only those of the Lan family could undo the spell. If one attempted to speak by brute force, either their lips would be torn to shreds by the effort, or they'd lose their voice for days. The penitent one had to keep their mouth shut and self-reflect in silence until the punishment was over. Lan Shizui said, "There's no need to be angry, sect leader Jiang. As long as he does not try forcibly to break the spell, it will be automatically undone in 1 incense time." 1 incense time it's a way of measuring time by, how much the incense burns. It's like half an hour. It's not bad. Wish I could make people be quiet for half an hour. It's like a real live mute button. Jiancheng had yet to reply when a man clad in the Jiangklang's purple came rushing out of the woods. "Sect leader!" When he saw Lan Wangji standing there, however, he appeared hesitant. Jiancheng said derisively, "Go ahead. What other bad news do you have to report?" The sect disciple said in a small voice, "Not long ago, a flying blue sword destroyed the immortal binding nets you arranged." Jiancheng shot Lan Wangji a look, anger clouding his expression once more. "How many?" The sect disciple replied cautiously, "All of them?" "Over 400! Jiancheng seethed with anger. He had never expected such bad luck in this expedition. He'd originally come to assist Jinling. The boy was 15 this year, the age to make his debut and fight for experience with the juniors from other clans. Jiancheng had reviewed the options carefully before deciding on Mount Dafan as the hunting ground. He'd then set up nets everywhere and scared off the other cultivators, making it so difficult for them to move they'd be forced to back off. Also, Jinling would emerge the winner without anyone fighting him for the title. While over 400 immortal binding nets were extremely expensive, the price was nothing to the Jiangklang of Yunmeng. I don't know if I'm saying that right, I'll have to check. However, destroyed nets were a small matter compared to losing face. Lan Wangji's actions made Jiancheng boil with anger, and his fury spiraled higher and higher. He narrowed his eyes, and his left hand subconsciously stroked the ring on his right index finger. This was a dangerous sign. Uh-oh. There seems to be consequence. Oh no, not the consequences of my actions. Everyone knew the ring was a formidable and deadly spiritual weapon. Once the Jiangclan leader started fiddling with it, it signaled his intent to kill. However, Jiang Cheng didn't stroke it for long before he forced his hostility back down. Although he was quite unhappy, as the leader of a sect, there was much to consider. He couldn't be as impulsive as that brat Jinling. Ever since the decline of the Nie clan of Qinghe, of the current three great clans, the Jin clan of Lanling and the Lan clan of Gusu had always been close to the strong personal friendship, due to the strong personal friendship shared by their clan leaders. Jiang Cheng ruled the Jiang clan of Yanmeng alone, so it could have been said he was in a state of isolation. Huang Guanjun, Lan Wangji, was a distinguished cultivator of great prestige. In addition, his elder brother, Zewu Jun, Lan Zichen, was the clan leader of the Lan clan of Gusu, and the two brothers had always gotten along well. Overall, it was best if Jiang Cheng kept things peaceful instead of giving in to his violent urges. To clarify, if you're having trouble, 3 big clans are left. No, 4. Sorry, 4 clans. But the Ni clan, or the Nie, I don't know, they're falling down on hard times. They ain't that great anymore. So the 3 big ones are Lan clan of Gusu. Of is where they're from, so they're from the Gusu area. So Lan clan, Jin clan, and Jiang clan. The Lan clan and the Jin clan are buddies because the leaders are both besties. Lan Zichen and Jin Guangyao are besties. Lan Wangji is Lan Zichen's little brother. So Jiang clan, he's sitting here thinking, okay, I'm one of the 3 big clans, but the other 2 big clans are besties because their leaders are like in love with each other. They're besties. And that's the little brother of that guy. So I can't fuck around here. This is not gonna go well for me. Oh, I feel like I'm back in 5th grade, and I mean that in the best way. Well, thank you. And thank you for the Silent Hill. I'm glad you enjoy my Silent Hill stuff. Thank you. Alright. Furthermore, Jiang Cheng's sword, Santu, had never formally crossed blades with... I don't know why my frickin' dyslexic eyes keep jumping lines. I keep reading things backwards. Had never formally crossed with Lan Wangji's sword Bichen, so no one knew which was the better blade. Although he had on his hand the family heirloom ring, Sidian, Lan Wangji's Guqin, also named Wangji, was equally renowned. Jiang Cheng loathed being at a disadvantage in a fight, so unless victory was absolutely certain, attacking Lan Wangji was not within the realm of consideration. Jiang Cheng slowly withdrew his left hand, which had been stroking the ring. It appeared that Lan Wangji had set his mind to interfere in the affair, so continuing to play the role of villain would only cause trouble. He would simply have to remember this for the time being. After weighing his options, Jiang Cheng turned his head and saw Jinling still had his hands covering his mouth angrily. Since Hong Wonjun wants to punish you, take the lesson for once. It's not easy for him either to manage the juniors from another clan. His tone was sarcastic, but it was unclear to whom it was directed. Lan Wangji, who never responded to such provocation, ignored him. Jiang Cheng turned, his voice scathing. What are you standing around for, waiting for the prey to run into your sword? If you can't catch the creature here on Mont Dafan tonight, then you needn't come to me again in the future. Jinling shot Wei Wuxian a death glare, but didn't dare to glare at Lan Wangji, who'd been the one to punish him into silence. He sheathed his sword and bowed to the elders, then left with his bow in hand. Lan Shizhui spoke up. Sect leader Jiang, the Lan clan of Gusu will fully I don't know why I can't read English words now. I'm losing my ability to read today. I need to go and look for new glasses. It's been a while, and I think I need to update. Oh, bye, Miss Leather. Have a good one. We will fully recompense all the immortal binding nets that were destroyed. Jiang Cheng sneered. No need. Then he turned in the opposite direction and strode confidently down the mountain. The sect disciples behind him all quietly followed with long faces, knowing there'd be an inevitable round of punishment upon their return. After they had gone, Lan Jingyi posed a general question. Why is sect leader Jiang like that? I'm a little lost. Yeah. It's hard to follow because a lot of the names, especially I think I personally process better with the manga because the images help, or the TV show. If you've seen one or the other, it helps when you're reading the book. Basically, 2 big clans with their kind of 2 head leaders, well, one's like a lower lead, he's the brother. The students are with them. They basically were, you know, I'm bigger than you are. No, I'm bigger, like, being tough. The ones, the John clan kind of lost out there because they were being rude, and Lan Wangji put them in their place for kind of trying to crowd out the mountains to themselves. So basically, Zhang Clan lost. They're now leaving and going home, and the Lan clan saved Wei Wuxian from getting the shit beat out of him. Let's see, where were we? Then he remembered his family upbringing and the rules against speaking behind another's back. He snuck a scared peek at Hung Guangjun before shrinking back and shutting up. Lan Shizui gave Wei Wuxian a light smile and said, "We meet again, Mo Gongzi." Wei Wuxian forced a smile, but it was Lan Wangji who spoke instead, his order succinct and clear without any flowery language. "Do your work." Only then did the juniors remember why they were on Mount Dafan. They gathered themselves and respectfully awaited further instructions. A moment later, Lan Wangji said, "Do your best, but do not overexert." His voice was deep and captivating. If one stood close, it would make the heart flutter. If your name is Wei Ying. The juniors acknowledged the order politely and headed deeper into the woods, not daring to stay longer. Wei Wuxian thought to himself that Zhang Cheng and Lan Zhan were really two completely different people. Even their methods of instructing juniors were irreconcilably opposed. Remember that in Chinese, in this era, you have like a private name, like a personal name for your friends and family, and then a public name that like anybody can use. Lan Wangji is the public name for this character, and Lan Zhan is his private name. And Wei Ying thinks of him that way because they were like besties in the old days. Just as he was thinking this, he suddenly saw Lan Wangji give him a nod, curt and almost imperceptible. It made him unconsciously pause. Lan Wangji had been painfully serious ever since he was young, a principled perfectionist, always so stern and stiff, as if there had never been a time when he was lively. Back then, he'd been extremely against Wei Wuxian cultivating the demonic path. Lan Shizui should already have informed Lan Wangji of his suspicious behavior at the Mo estate, yet the man only nodded at him to give his regards. Wei Wuxian figured he was thanking him for helping the Lan juniors out, so he immediately returned the gesture without thinking. But when he looked up again, Lan Wangji was already gone. He paused for a moment, then turned to descend the mountain. It didn't matter what prey was on Mount Dafan, he couldn't pursue it anymore. Wei Wuxian could rob anyone, but not Jinling. He couldn't believe that was Jinling. There were so many disciples in the Jin clan of Lanling that he genuinely never imagined he might run into Jinling. Had he known, he would never have mocked Jinling with that comment of his. "Didn't your mother teach you any manners?" If anyone else had said that to Jinling, Wei Wuxian would have taught the person what "a loose tongue spells trouble" meant. But the tongue that had said it had been his own. After a moment of standing in silence, Wei Wuxian raised his hand and slapped himself across the face. The slap was hard and clear, stinging his right cheek. Suddenly, there was rustling in the bushes nearby, and when Wei Wuxian peered over, a spotted donkey emerged. He dropped his hand, and this time the donkey voluntarily approached to rub it. Wei Wuxian tugged at its long ear and smiled wryly. "You wanted to save the damsel in distress, but made me go act the hero instead." The spotted donkey was whining in response when a wave of cultivators came from the distant end of the hill. After the 400-plus immortal binding nets were slashed by Lan Wangji's flying sword, the hesitant cultivators that had lurked in Fojiao Town now swarmed up the mountain anew. They were all technically Jinling's competition, and Wei Wuxian pondered for a moment on whether to beat them back down. After a moment of thought, he silently moved off the path. I think it's funny. Like, the text is critiquing Zhang Cheng for how overly defensive he was of Jinling, and Wei Wuxian, of course, from the position of being an outsider, was like, man, this kid's spoiled, this is ridiculous, shouldn't be doing this. But the moment he realizes it's Jinling, he's like, should I beat up all these people for Jinling? Maybe I should. These people are the same. The group was composed of disciples from various clans, dressed in all sorts of different uniforms. They complained as they went. That Jin Gongzi, the Jin family and the Jiang family both, they all spoil him. So young and already so unreasonable and bossy. It'll be the end of the world if he takes over control of the Jin clan of Lanling in the future. We'll be doomed. Wei Wuxian slowed his pace. A soft-hearted girl cultivator sighed. How can they not spoil and pamper him? Losing both his parents at such a young age? Shime, it doesn't work like that. So what if he lost both his parents? There are plenty of people in the world who've lost both their parents. If everyone acted like him, it'd be terrible. That being said, Wei Wuxian really went for it, didn't he? Jinling's mother was Jian Cheng's blood sister, eh? And what's more, she was the Shiji who raised that Wei Wuxian. What an injustice for Zhang Yan Li, too, to have raised such an ingrate. And Jin Shi... This one's going to be hard, too. Z-I-X-U-A-N. I think it's like Xixuan? Zixuan, maybe? Jin Xixuan. I don't know that I'm going to be able to say that. I'm going to have to watch the show again and listen to everybody say each other's names. To meet such a horrible end just because of some quarrel with Wei Wuxian in the past. Why did Wei Wuxian have quarrels with everyone? Ain't that the question? Besides the pack of crazy dogs he kept, have you ever heard of anyone getting along well with him? He had enemies everywhere. The world despised him. Even Han Guangjun couldn't stand the sight of him. They were always at complete odds with each other. Speaking of, thank goodness for Han Guangjun today. After walking for a while, the sound of a trickling creek suddenly flowed into Wei Wuxian's ears. This was something he hadn't heard on his way here. Only then did Wei Wuxian notice he'd taken the wrong path down the mountain and forked off onto another road. He led the donkey... I don't know why I just said monkey. He led the donkey down to the side of the creek. The moon had risen, and the skies above the water were unconcealed by any branches or leaves. The creek was cracked with patches of frosty white. Reflected back at him, Wei Wuxian saw a face that distorted with the flow of the water. He slapped the water viciously, shattering that absurd, laughable face. He raised his dripping palms and washed away the powder foundation with the creek water. What the water now reflected was a young man, incredibly handsome and poised. He was so pristine it was as if he'd been washed by the moonlight above, with a beaming face and bright eyes, and lips that curved slightly upwards. But when he hung his head to stare at himself, the droplets clinging to his lashes fell relentlessly like tears. This was a young foreign face. This wasn't the Yiling patriarch Wei Wuxian, who had once raised the earth and ravaged the world with bloody tempests. He stared at that reflection for a long time before he wiped his face a few more times, rubbed his eyes, and sat down heavily by the creek. It wasn't that he couldn't endure talk. After all, he was already well aware of the path he'd chosen back when he made his decision. He'd already cautioned himself to remember the motto of the Jianclang of young men, attempt the impossible. He'd truly thought his heart was made of stone, but humans were no stalks of grass, not unfeeling, and in the end he was human after all. The little spotted donkey seemed to know he wasn't in a good mood right now, and amazingly did not bray impatiently, only swishing its tail while walking away after a moment of quiet. Wei Wuxian sat by the creek and didn't react. It looked back and kicked its hooves. Wei Wuxian still ignored it, so the spotted donkey returned in a huff and caught Wei Wuxian by the hem with its teeth, tugging and pulling. It made no difference to Wei Wuxian whether he stayed or left, so since the donkey had gone as far as to bite him, he went with it. The spotted donkey led him to some trees and started circling around a piece of grass. A Chun-kun bag sat sitting quietly there. Over it hung a broken golden net, so it must have been something an unlucky cultivator dropped when they tried to break free. Wei Wuxian picked up the bag and opened it. Inside was an assortment of items like a bottle gourd of medicinal wine, talismans, a little Yao-reflecting mirror, and so on. He rummaged through the bag for a bit and casually took out a handful of talismans. A ball of flames was suddenly ablaze in his hand. What had just ignited was a yin-burning talisman. Like its name, it used yin energy as fuel and would automatically be ignited upon contact with yin energy. The greater the yin energy, the bigger the flame. It blazed the instant it was taken out of the bag, meaning there were spirits nearby. The moment Wei Wuxian saw the firelight, he raised his guard and probed around for the direction with the torch raised. When he turned eastward, the fire died down. When he turned westward, the fire blazed. He'd only taken a few steps in that direction when he saw a slumped form in white appear beneath a tree. The talisman burned out, and remnant embers fell from his fingertips. An elder with his back facing him was grumbling under his breath. Wei Wuxian approached slowly, and the words mumbled from the elder's lips became clearer. "It hurts, it hurts." "Where does it hurt?" Wei Wuxian asked. The head, my head," the elder replied. "Let me take a look," Wei Wuxian said. He circled around to the elder's side and saw a large bloody gaping hole on his forehead. This was a soul of the dead, probably killed by way of some weapon to the head. He was wearing funeral clothes, their material and cut both of high quality, meaning he'd already been properly buried. This wasn't the soul of a living that a human had lost, but a soul of the dead should never have appeared on Mount Dafan. Wei Wuxian couldn't come up with a plausible explanation for this. Feeling uneasy, he hopped onto the back of the donkey, gave it a slap and a shout, and urged it to chase in the direction that Jinling and the others had approached the mountain. We've been going for about an hour. I think we're going to have to call it there because, dang, this is a long chapter. And it's probably going to take us another half hour to keep reading. I don't want to not waste, but I don't want to ruin my voice. We'll call it there. That's a pretty good moment to stop. There's a lot going on in that chapter as far as, like, name dropping. A lot of characters being mentioned, a lot of this clan and that clan and every clan. It's backstory. If you don't follow it all, that's okay. It'll make more sense the more that you meet these characters, because they're essentially just foreshadowing drama that's going to happen. This story is a lot about drama, about this clan and that guy not liking that guy, and this guy's friends with that guy, and Wei Wuxian gets caught up in the middle of all of it and all the drama in both lives. Both that one and this one, things go wrong because of clan drama. So don't worry too much about if you don't remember everybody, blah, blah, blah. Basically, Wei Wuxian has been reborn into his new life. He went looking for trouble, and he found it. But he also got reintroduced to two major characters of the book. John Chang, who is his adopted brother that he grew up with. Something happened in the past that turned them into enemies, unfortunately, and it killed his sister. Jinling is his nephew, and he feels very guilty about what happened to his sister and his nephew being raised without a mother because of him. Lanjan, or Lan Wangji, is from another clan and is a friend, an old classmate of Wei Ying's, and doesn't seem to be as opposed to Wei Ying. In his head, he feels like he was opposed to his demonic cultivation and stuff in the past, but not anywhere near as negative as John Chang is, clearly. So his brother, his old friend, his nephew, those are the three that we really got to remember, and we'll come back next time. I'm thinking Wednesday. I'm going to try to get back to Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. We'll see how that works. If this time was good for people, we'll do that again. This will be moved to the second channel, to the book channel, when the stream is done. So if you're looking for the books and the book readings, that is on my second channel. It is linked in most of my descriptions, I think. It's called The Gaming Muse, but with gay in it. So you can find it if you search my name. I should actually put it up here so I can link it when the streams are done. Thanks again for listening. I will see you guys Wednesday. Join the Discord if you actually want to be updated when this stuff's happening, because that's where I post most updates. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.